I found him on social media. Turns out we've known each other because we have a FlightScope affiliation. And he, over there with a very impressive looking beard, if you're watching on YouTube, is Ian Mellor. Welcome to our podcast, Ian. How are you?
Doing well, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. I mean, I've become an instant fan. I was honestly on vacation and I was cruising around on Instagram and I found a video of yours, and then I went into your profile, and the next thing I found myself down a rabbit hole of incredible stuff which I want to share. But before we go to that, let's introduce you to our global audience. Tell the folks a bit about you, please.
So grew up in England from Manchester, moved over to the US in 2008. Prior to that, I actually studied a degree that was very much golf focused, and it was based at the University of Central Lancashire, a sports technology degree that you could kind of cater to any sport. So found myself going down a rabbit hole in sports biomechanics, sports psychology, and I could tailor it to golf.
Yeah.
Which really I was super fortunate to find, because even to this day I find it hard to look at degrees for students to find things that really kind of went down that avenue.
Mm-hmm.
So after graduating, taught a little bit in England, and then fortunately moved to the US to coach at a junior academy over here.
All right.
And what I really loved about the opportunity in the US, sorry, Mark.
No, you're good. Keep going. It's just a signal. There we go. You come back. Just
So
the folks that are listening on just audio too. So we just lost your picture for a second. Don't worry.
All right. Yeah. So what I really loved about the opportunity in the US was it really engulfed what I felt was a true coaching opportunity. In the UK, it was very much work with players for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But the junior coaching concept in the US had a focus on helping young players go to college over here. And they would come and train for a 10-month period. So you really got to know the player. You got to understand everything that was influencing performance, and really support that player towards their goals in a way that I had never really experienced before. So initially coming over to the US, wanting to coach and play a bit, me being me, which is a person that's just hugely into anything that impacts performance anyway, in any domain, then I was able to do that with golf, with players. There was that emotional connection to what was going on. So that was really a big thing for me, like making that connection as far as from a coach, and be able to work with the players and have the players trust at that point was something very new. I moved down to Orlando in 2011, and then just from a whole learning experience, everything really, really blew up. I was able to work at a golf school that Sean Foley was very closely affiliated with, so I watched Sean teach a lot. Yeah. And then again, that influence from a coaching standpoint and being aware of everything that went into play development just went to a whole new level, because then it became a case of not just from a coaching aspect on the technical swing point of view, but Craig Davies and at Ty Valley, these doctors were involved helping players to move better, move well. Sports psychologists were involved. So you got to see what the support that elite performers really had from so many different aspects. That then moving on their 5-year period in there, working with the golf school there, in 2016 branched off and started my own school with a friend of mine, Tyler McGee. Right. We started MMG Performance, and our whole concept was to give young players the opportunity to train like the best players in the world. So that's when we started integrating. We had launch monitors, 3D motion capture, using the expertise of the doctors that work with the PGA Tour players, just to round everything together and then help one person move towards their aspirations. Yeah. So it was that's kind of my background there. So really passionate just about helping players. I love the game, still very passionate to play and improve myself. But then second of all, just very passionate about the game and just anything about play development and performance. The videos you referenced were really just
they're generic.
Clip of,
but what I love about those videos is they're not like necessarily young person centric. These things are helpful to all and sundry, which is, I was looking through your stuff and I was like, man, that's awesome. And that's good. And this is so applicable. And all of the stuff was, there were concepts that sometimes I feel like can get misunderstood. And they're concepts truly that are hard to explain with a limited amount of time. And you're not really talking back and forth with someone. Yet you did such a great job of making these, very important things sound simple and easy to apply.
Oh, well, thanks, Mark. There was definitely a little bit of a process to that.
Mhm.
A lot of failure. When
We
when,
all.
it, when kind of the country went into lockdown or the travel kind of really restricted over a couple of years ago, the program I was just talking about, MMG Performance, was an international junior program. We had
Yeah.
players coming from all over the world to train with us. That shut down and literally thrown into like, okay, like what do we do now with this time, and how do you help players, and how do you continue to put good stuff out there? So that's just the opportunity for me to be me, essentially.
Yeah.
So I started to look down YouTube as an opportunity to just kind of help players put stuff out there, um, and getting in front of a camera at first was very, very challenging for me. And YouTube, they say 5 to 10 minutes is that's kind of like the key window for
Yeah, I know. Huh?
hitting their algorithm and stuff like that. And I found that really difficult. And the other thing I found really difficult was, as you mentioned there, trying not to just put out content that would only hit a few people, but to communicate in a way that I felt that most players could somehow get something out of it. So yeah, it was definitely a process getting there, but just I got to the point where I found like the 1 minute reels on Instagram has been a good place right now.
It really is. Well, look, you turned our heads over yet on the mark, certainly, and now I've got you, and you can share concepts. Folks, I challenged Ian with when I reached out. He's like, "Sure, I'd love to," and then I said, "Okay, Ian, I want you to share 5 concepts to enhance one's golf swing." And you came back with a list that I've got in front of me over here. But just so folks know, Ian listed his influences. Sean Foley's one. Another's Mark Bull, who's been on the show twice. And everything that Mark says to me, I would almost list in the Gospels of golf instruction, because he's so holistic and just such a sharp thinker. So your influences are tremendous, and I'm looking forward to you, building on these now. So again, the topic, 5 key moves to build a better golf swing. I'm going to just read the title of each to you and then just let you wax poetic in us chat. So, number 1, and I'm not sure if you put these in order of importance or not. I don't think it means anything, but you go, learn to move and building movement awareness, which caught my attention right off the bat, because, folks who start playing golf, the beginners listening to this, they pick up a club and they just try and hit a ball, and it's a hitting motion. Then the folks who've advanced, they know how to swing some, but then they're caught in the weeds of like, well, I'm hearing this and I'm seeing that and I should be doing this, and they've got no awareness of who they are and what they're capable of doing. So that's me. Off you go. Have a go.
Mark, you definitely touched on something there. I'm just going to very briefly, and yeah, Mark Bull has been very kind to me over the years, and even just in that title there, movement awareness, in that I think back to spending time with Mark very recently,
Yeah.
in that really when we're coaching and we're teaching there with players and we have that opportunity, we're really coaching awareness, whether it's awareness of where the club face is, it's awareness of the way we're moving in transition, whatever it is, we're coaching awareness. So a good place to start when you're looking at improving your golf swing, which is what I think most players out there are looking to do, they want to hit the ball better, is to just learn to move, and understand. And essentially in my head, I've got this picture of when a player comes in to work with us, and I always encourage them to go and have a fitness screening first. And I'll do it before we get on the 3D motion capture or before we work on the swing or anything else. And there's this picture I have in my head as well, is that when the player goes through the screen, the doctors that we work with are at that level where they pretty much describe to us the way the player moves in their swing, having not seen them swing before.
Mm-hmm.
So they can understand what the body's doing and what options they have. So they can very much in their head get a very good idea of how they're going to move. So for what I'm really trying to encourage to the viewers is is to one, if that's an opportunity for you to get a golf specific screen, that's something that's going to be hugely helpful. The more experienced the person you go to, the more experience they've had with high level players or just working with golfers is going to be hugely helpful. But also just even to the level of, if you look at the PGA Tour now and the transition it's had over the last 20 years, and I don't think I think every player on the tour now is working from a physical standpoint with someone to help them in that area. But then also, if you look, we're now at the level where everyone aspiring to play at that level, down to junior golfers are now getting that screen. And I just think that the players I don't see getting the screen sometimes are the people that are, they might have been in the game a number of years, but they're putting a lot of time into their game. And it's, if you can understand, okay, there's these 1, 2, 3 areas of your body that are restricting you and holding you back from improving. It's like, here's just 2 exercises to do 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And it opens up a whole new door to that person.
Yeah. You know what I love about that? Because we've all seen it countless times, and folks watching / listening to this, they're like, if they're truthful with themselves, they could be like, well, I'm that guy that's beating myself against the head on the range all day long, trying to get this thing that my PGA pro is teaching me, but I just can't do it. And if you just can't do it, it's because you're unable to do it. It's not like you aren't physically athletic enough, if you will. And then the thing I wanted to touch on too is the movement awareness, because most folks, they're like, go get to the golf course and they're like, well, I've got to hit the ball. So they think hit. And then someone says, well, you've got to shift your weight and you've got to, turn your shoulders, and we'll talk about the trail arm, you and me, in a second. So they start to get all this stuff going on, but they're not aware of how they're moving in relation to how the club's moving. So I want you to talk there for a little while too, because that awareness of where the club face is, like you touched on, and then the physical awareness is a big deal for me.
Oh, sorry, we're good there, Mike, aren't we? So the movement awareness. So essentially, I mean, this is just, if I'm just speaking very simplistically, players that I've seen that have worked out before, simply because when you work out, you've got to build that awareness of how to lift a weight, do an exercise, whatever it might be. That in its own is building the neurological pathways of the awareness of the way different segments are moving, just where your body is in space doing certain moves. So that essentially the patterning for a good golf swing you can do away from the golf course. And even what I've noticed with players is players that are working out, taking care of their bodies anyway, even if it's not golf specific, when they turn up to the range and you ask them to sit through certain movements, they seem to grasp them much quicker. I got a young player right now. She's really just beginning, and she's transitioned really quickly through the learning phases in with some skills. And I asked her, I said, "Oh," because she mentioned she'd done a little bit of lifting before and things like that. And she's actually training to do the Junior Olympics with lifting. Right. And it's amazing. And it's amazing to me how that particular player is really grasping some movements in the golf swing so quickly. And then when she told me that, it didn't really, and this is what I hear from the doctors as well. You're not just doing it to take care of your body. You're not just opening up opportunities to move better in your golf swing when you're going through a golf specific program, but you're actually, from a neurological standpoint, making it easier for you to learn new moves. So there's a lot of different ways in which it's just beneficial doing that stuff away from the golf course.
Yeah, there's no doubt athleticism and just doing anything, throwing balls, kicking, jumping, just timing is a big deal. All right, that's sort of the intellectual property that you've dealt with. Now we're getting into things that are more physical, if you will. And the second point you list is, after you're aware and you know how to move and you've been assessed, you say, seek to understand your dominant movement pattern. And I want you to build on that, but then I'm also going to add to that, how about just understanding along those lines what your dominant movement pattern is likely to result in terms of ball flights? What's that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So there's almost a connection there that I wish I'd tied in a little bit better. So when a player does sort of a fitness screen,
Mm-hmm.
You'll start to understand the certain areas to approach and build upon from a physical standpoint. But then also what you want to understand is tie that into a dominant movement pattern. So a really common way in which I work with players is they get the screen and then we come out, we put them on the 3D motion capture. And in the 3D motion capture, it really a player's dominant move, which I'll kind of highlight the way I see that in a moment. But a dominant move becomes quite evident quite quickly after you've seen a few typical shots. Mm-hmm. Typical being the way the player would categorize them. And then obviously in a lesson as well, you'll ask them about the ball flights they're getting, as that's what I think you're referring to there. Mm-hmm. But the dominant movement pattern to me is when you look at a player's screen on 3D, there'll be a consistent pattern in the way the segments are moving and interacting with each other. And it'll very much relate to the missed shots they get, the ball flights they find difficult to hit, mm-hmm. And any of the, I think from contact and all these different things that players might feed back to you, you can pretty much relate to the certain movement patterns that they want to move away from. Mm-hmm. But then there's also things in there that you want to encourage a little bit more of. So I never really look at it as far as in a golf swing, you have to change things. There's certain patterns you'd want to reduce, do a little bit less of, and there's certain things you'd want to do a little bit more of. And it's learning what you have to do to encourage more of the better patterns. And in working towards them, you'll actually move away from the patterns that lead to your, the ball flights that you don't like the look of.
Hey, as a follow-up to that, let's say the individual has now done this and they understand who they are, what they're capable of doing, and they're working towards better, whatever that might be. I want you to advise folks a little bit too, because I think at times the expectations and the management thereof are a big deal too, because now I'm a golfer and I come to you in Mellor and you say to me, we do a screen and you're like, Mark, this is where you're misfiring and this is what's got to improve. And then all of a sudden I have stars in my eyes going, well, I'm going to be able to do this, the polar opposite of it, if I just work very hard, where that's unlikely. So I want you to help people manage their expectations with regard to this concept, please.
Yeah. So one thing that you mentioned there that really kind of hit home with me is that the work really hard phrase you said there. And that, going back to sports psychology here with me now, and I mean, a lot of people would connect to what I'm going to say, to the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
So the 10,000 hour rule was, back early 90s, Anders Ericsson. And if you read the paper there on deliberate practice, you've got obviously the amount of time that you spend. You have to spend a certain amount of time to be really good at something. But then there's two other pillars of performance, and the other pillars are what's your strategy. It's okay. So it's like you can spend 10,000 hours, but what's your strategy? Your strategy has to be good. You have to be working towards certain areas that impact you reaching your goals. And then the third pillar of the performance is your intensity, which for me, I categorize it more as just being present in what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So I say you've got to spend a certain amount of time. You've got to have the strategy in place. You're like, the strategy is very effective towards achieving whatever goal you're trying to achieve. So in golf here, that's why I use the 3D motion capture. Yeah. I identify the pattern very early on that we're going to work on. Moving away from, I think historically, we used what we had. We would use whatever level of camera we could get hold of, and we're looking from different angles. The 3D motion capture to me just took all that away. And it's like, well, okay, now I can measure it. I can look from any angle. The pattern's really obvious. And then you get into the psychology side of it. Now they've got a good strategy. How do you make sure they're turning up every day and they're present at working on, the areas you've chosen to work on with the strategies you've chosen?
Yeah, that's a really good point. That look, I'm dating myself here. I'm significantly older than you. I was part of the Sony Handycam brigade from the early 90s. That was the must do. And to your point, now you have the 3D motion capture, and now I work alongside the sports box people, G.A. Lee and Terry Rolls, and you can video someone's golf swing in slow motion on your phone, and then turn this into an AI image that gives you numbers as you're moving through the path. So You're right about that. Once you start working, you have a way to make sure that the work is directed, I guess is the best word.
It's purposeful. It's just as purposeful as it can be towards what the player's asking to achieve. They might come in with a simple question of like, Ian, why am I hitting this shot? And it's like, well, okay, here's your pattern. Here's the things you're going to have to do to move away from that shot. Let's do a bit more of that. Let's not worry about the missed shot anymore. And let's find the most effective strategy for you. And that's more the coaching side of it. So, because I'm definitely not a fan of telling a player what they have to do. This is the way you're currently moving. Let's look at a few other opportunities to move you away from that ball flight, and let's find a way that it really connects with you. So you can go away and you're not just made a list of a bunch of notes of things that I told you.
Yeah,
it has more meaning to you.
Yeah, folks, and that'll stop you from spinning your wheels on the practice tee, and you'll make some real productive strides. All right, now into the physical aspects. Those were sort of the ethereal concepts. All right, number 3, the value of standing well at address. And this, to me, I'm looking forward to your explanation, because folks will go for a lesson and Joe Pro will say to them, you address the ball properly, and that's what you're going to start. Then all of a sudden, these folks are like, well, I'm going to address the ball properly, but the ball's not getting any better through the air, kind of thing. And then they just give up on it, where that is probably the worst thing they can do, because in my estimations, because it's athletic, how you set up to a golf ball is essentially going to define what you're able to do during your golf swing that lasts somewhere close to a second.
Yeah, and I've got to empathize with players as well, because obviously we've had years to kind of be around the game, watch the best players and study what they do, and really kind of just understand the game, what it takes to become a good performer. But yeah, and then that kind of a situation where it's like, okay, like a player's being encouraged, okay, let's just stand well at address.
Yeah.
Are they going to initially get that connection as far from like, okay, if I stand well, I'm going to hit more good golf shots right away? Like no, because everyone's got a story. So it's like, okay, what were they doing before? How were they standing? How was that influencing their movement? What environments have they practiced in the past? What concepts do they currently have of the game? So all these things have been influencing the way they move and how they've come to that moment in time where it's like, okay, what's the best way we can use the time now to improve you? And it's like, let's just learn to stand well right now. And then it's just that understanding of golf. It's just a constant learning process. So for a player that's in that kind of scenario, I would say that learn to stand well, but then also in that session, ask your coach questions so that you understand, like, okay, so if I stand well like this, how is that going to help me move away from my bad shots? Or if there's a particular bad shot you've got, like, just ask for that understanding. Say, okay, I stand well, but I'm still doing this. Is there anything I can do to help resolve this issue or to help move away from that?
You know what I like that you've done there? Because I'm listening to you like a fan now, right? Not the interviewer. And when you say the word address to any golfer, they have images of the golfer in perfect posture, standing at parallel to the target line. But you are talking about standing appropriately to what you want to hit ball flight wise as well. Am I correct in my understanding here?
Well, yeah, but also for you. I mean, that one, and when I always try to not compare people to others, because I mean, if you watch the PGA Tour and the way that each player there addresses the ball, it's so different. And again, going back to just what I was mentioning previously, is that there's a huge aspect of the feedback of the doctors that screen the players. And I'll end almost nearly every screen just asking the doctor, saying, okay, where should this player stand to optimize, their ranges for their rotation, for them to use the ground and create force, be in balance, and just to move well. So, I mean, even with the experience I've got, and obviously, if the doctor wasn't there, I'd have a good idea of how to get a player to stand. But with the doctor there, I'm going to ask them, because they've just screened them at a very high level, so they're going to have a much better idea of how that player is going to stand. But yeah, everyone should have their own way of standing to the golf ball, and that's where it goes back to that learning how to move journey, the awareness, because everyone's different. So it's understanding for you how to set up to the shots and how to stand at the ball.
Yeah, I love that. One size doesn't fit all. And you must be aware of how you need to stand in order to generate what you're intending to deliver ball flight wise or shot wise, trajectory wise. I know this is generic, but I want to do this because I've got images in my mind of golfers setting up to the ball. And to me, you see common errors. And a lot of us are sedentary nowadays because we're sitting in front of a podcast like I am, and I'm all hunched over, and I'm, the glutes have weakened up. So if you had to just cast a big, wide, generic blanket over this and say the biggest setup issue you tend to see, what is that? What's the big?
I would just encourage players to stand well through their spine.
All right.
Because just so yeah, that's what I'd say. If a person are good at just feeling as though they're 1 inch taller, so they're nice and long through their spine. Yeah, and even then, the great little
setup.
I like it. But that's what you did there, Matt, was awesome. It is, and I actually encourage them more, just at the sense of instead of open, almost expansive to the rib cage, which is almost a little bit more of extending through the spine there. I'd actually encourage more, just feel like you're lifting your rib cage up from your pelvis, so you're nice and long. So again, another way would be a sense of if someone's pulling a string up to the top of your head, nice and tall, then just so that you're 1 inch taller, and then just learning how to do a really good hip hinge, maintaining that spinal position.
Yeah.
And that on its own, that I see that I worked on that daily with really good players, and it just takes time to just develop that good hip hinge. Again, one thing, movement awareness in the gym, nice hip hinge. You've seen a ton of exercises in a gym place as well, but long spine, then just doing a nice hip hinge, and if you can do that, that's a great place to start.
For the audio folks who are not watching this, if you're hearing giggling, it's me because I'm sitting up straighter while Ian is talking to me. but also, a part of this, and when you were talking about the lengthening of the spine, you fired a big hole in all of the keep your head down, folks, because the first advice you're going to get from the grill room, I call it Advil for the golf swing, is keep your head down, right? And all the head down folks just collapse the chest, the shoulders hunch over, the spine rounds, everything gets shorter in the effort to keep their head looking at the ground. Were you saying lengthen everything, then bend appropriately out of the hips? Folks, this is gospel according to this guy over here.
Lengthening, I just want one misconception that some viewers may have is that what I'm suggesting in lengthening is within the 3 natural curves of the spine. So just to allow the spine the opportunity to move at its best. So obviously rotation is important in the golf swing, and we're always trying to limit the amount of people may stand up, move downwards, and move side to side. So if you get someone set up really well, good length through the spine, but maintaining their natural curves, it gives you an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, if I'm scrolling around social media, which I do when I'm on a break, folks, I'm getting a common theme all of the time on from all the golf instructors talking about wrist flexion and early extension. You're hearing these buzz phrases all the time, almost becoming like hashtags. What Ian is saying there, if you're an early extender, I would pay attention, and I certainly would go and apply that. All right, so that's number 3 of 5. Number 4 was the first one that I saw of yours. And that made me follow you. And then I went and looked at everything else. And you said moving well through the trail arm in the backswing. Now, the trail arm for a right-hander would be your right arm. For a lefty would be your left arm. And I've always, I've been teaching golf since Moby Dick was a minnow. And I always believe that the trail arm defines width in the swing. So from your backswing for a right-hander, it's your right arm. For the lefty, it's the left arm. And so when you talked about how the trail arm moves, now watch this segment of yours. Folks can find it on your social media. I was like, yeah, because I loved the way you went about it too, because you had I believe you didn't have a dumbbell in your hand, but you were showing how the elbow moved in relation to the body. And I thought it was very, very good stuff. So please go there.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the trail arm really is, it's just that connection of the way that you move through your trail arm and the structure of the arms and how that influences the trail shoulder movement at the top, because we have that fascial connection between the lead hip and the trail shoulder. So if you're in a good position at the top through shoulder, elbow, hand at the top, then when you go to transition, it has a really good influence on the way the lead hip moves. Yeah. So if you move well through trail arm, through backswing, and you get into a good position at the top, it then allows you much more a better opportunity to move well with your lead hip, with your pelvis in transition.
At the risk of interrupting, folks, I was listening, but now I need you to hear that again. Here's a guy, highly sought after by golfers of all skill levels, talking about how the trail arm influences how your hips move on the downswing and through impact. And for all of you folks that are complaining about not being open enough, here's Ian saying to you, hey, how about situating your backswing trail arm a bit better? And that might help you to go and achieve what you want through impact.
Yeah, I mean, and the golf swing, everyone's different. I'm definitely an advocate. I want every player I work with to feel like they get that personalized approach. But it's also a movement in everything affects everything. Mm-hmm. So the way that you stand at the ball influences the way that you move away. How you move through backswing is going to influence how you move through transition. How you move through our transition is going to influence how you deliver the club. And then this was the reason I kind of went through the 5 moves, and we kind of went, the way that you move as a human influences, the way you're going to move in swing, then the way you your dominant moving patterns, but then also the way you stand influences moving away. And I chose the trail arm because I thought it would be more interesting just to focus on how the trail arm was moving rather than just putting takeaway.
Yeah.
Because I feel, for a number of players, I feel like they have the awareness of how they move through wrist influences how they move through their elbow, which influences how the player moves their trail shoulder. And then that's going to influence how they're going to move in the first stages of transition. So I mean, just a couple of common areas that I encourage for the majority of players, this is not everyone, there's always exceptions, would be that through the start of the swing, just to really make sure that the trail wrist isn't moving into too much extension early in the swing, because that's going to push the trail elbow behind, and it's going to put and it can very common push the have not the greatest influence on the trail shoulder.
All right.
So early in the swing, just making sure that the trail wrist isn't moving into too much extension, and also making sure that the trail, just the hand path in general, it's a reference in the trail hand, is not moving too early.
Exactly.
I mean, lots of players are looking to maintain space and get their arms in front of the body. Those two things early on really are detrimental for the majority of players to have space and move to the shot well. So, I mean, again, if you move well early in the swing, keeping the trail wrist without, so it's not moving into too much extension early. Encourage it, if anything, to move a little in front rather than in moving inwards.
Show the viewers just in front of the camera there what you what you mean by extension in the trail. What would that look like?
So if I was to trail wrist here, if it was to move too much that way, so that would be moving into too much extension early.
So for the listeners, folks, imagine you were kind of carrying a tray above your shoulder with your right hand. So
I'll try and do this for us here. But if you were moving through your takeaway, you're getting too much of that movement there in your wrist, then it's going to, I mean, the common pattern with that then is it then pushes the elbow a little bit behind. You can see that's already influencing how my shoulder moves.
Yeah.
And it's going to make it harder to get the elbow back in front of the body in the downswing. So just the wrist moving, staying more, I mean, for a lack of a better word, more neutral, allows the elbow to sit more down, and it allows it to sit more this way so you can move back in front easier on the way down.
Beautiful. Hey, for the listeners, what Ian was showing there, and it's so appropriate, and you can go and see it on his social media and YouTube, is imagine if the knuckles were just bending back towards your forearm. That's wrist extension. Wrist flexion would be in the opposite direction. I love your take there on how all of this can influence the sequencing of it all too, because the truth of it is a fundamentally sound golf swing, badly sequenced, is not going to be that functional. I mean, to this day, Nick Felder will say to me, he goes, the rhythm, the tempo, the timing, that's the glue that holds the golf swing together. And this guy was pretty good. So I love your take there on how it influences the sequencing of it all too.
Absolutely. Well, when I see a fluid golf swing, I mean, a lot of the times I tie it back to what I try to encourage is that as a player moves, and to move within the ranges in their joints, so they're maintaining options. So if you think in the golf swing, I mean, this one I learned from Dr. Bull is that the mind is like the greatest GPS. Yeah. You know, for in a golf swing, if you move out of, I don't want to say out of position, but if you have a certain movement that makes it a little bit more challenging, if you're in a place where you have options, then you can still continue to move smoothly, and you can make the certain corrections and compensations, that we'll call it, right, to still get to impact. But if you're constantly moving in a place where you're taking options away, then the GPS is constantly having to reroute, and that visually, I think, gets displayed as it's not as smooth as it could be. Yeah. So yeah, like I completely agree. If you're moving well, the sequencing good, the balance, and all those kind of terms that we use, you know, when we look at players that are really playing and moving well, I mean, there's definitely aspects to their movement that's really and really helping them display in that way.
Exactly. Right. I've kept you for a long time. I know you're on a deadline, so I want to whistle through this last one, and I want to tee it up by saying that I've asked a number of greats in the game. I've been lucky enough to speak with, you know, the Nicklases, the Watsons, the Gary players, the whole bunch of them, about, you know, and I pitched them just one question, like, the most important thing in the swing. Tom Watson was the guy who said to me, the transition, the change of direction between back and downswing. Your number 5 to, you know, building a good golf swing is improving the transition. So put a bow on the conversation with your observations, please.
Yeah, it's in the golf swing. It's I would say that whatever you see, so you do see so many different backswings, so many unique movements. But if a player is able to move in transition in a way that really puts them in a place where once transitions happen, let's say, you should be in a position to where. Sorry about that, Matt.
No, you're good.
Yeah, but once transitions happen, you should be in a place to where it's really hard to go wrong. Mm-hmm. So yeah, what I like to see in a transition is just that nice movement of the segments in the right order, just pelvis, rib cage, arms, hands, and club. So I like to think of it in a very athletic way. So if you were looking at, say, even a pitcher in baseball or someone in another hitting sport, things like that, just that nice movement of the segments. Mm-hmm. And then as far as timing standpoint, in the 3D, we have the peak speed. So when each segment is hitting its peak speed through the downswing as well. So I think for me, although that might not, if from a scientific standpoint, fall into transition, the order in which the players are actually applying the peak speeds of each segments, for me, ties into how they're transitioning. So as far as players transitioning, there was one little thing I would just to kind of give to your viewers. It would be just to learn how the pelvis moves in transition and become really clear and aware of what the pelvis does in that phase of the golf swing. Because if you move well to the top, and then you have good awareness of the way the pelvis is going to move in transition, in a lot of cases, it really helps a lot of players with delivery. So I think I put out a post not too long ago that really kind of pertains to the way that the pelvis just has a huge influence on the club path, mm-hmm. but also on controlling low point as well. So if in that transition phase, you can be very clear on, okay, like here's the way the pelvis would move for me, then it's going to help you to have the impacts that you're looking to have.
Fantastic. Okay, let's that was sort of the tease. Let's direct folks to your website, your social media, all those sorts of things, so they can see that and the other great tips that you've got there. So share the handles for us.
The handles, at ian.mellor.golf for Instagram. Website's ianmellergolf.com. Mm-hmm. I do have a YouTube. I think it's just Ian Mellor Golf.
So IANMELLOR. that the correct?
That's right. That's right, Mark. Yeah.
I was a good speller when I was a kid. Hey, listen, I kept you longer than you had available. Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate you. Folks, go check it out. It's good stuff. Hey, and I appreciate everything you're doing. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you you having me on and all the kind words. And yeah, it's been nice to do this.